I pulled on my boots, Rusty barking at my heels, and headed out to confront her. The air felt heavier now, the piece of my land shattered by those shots. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the spark of a war, one that'd test my patience, my resolve, and the very ground I stood on. Karen Mitchell, HOA Tyrant, had just declared herself my enemy, and I was ready to fight back. The story's just getting started, and things are about to get even wilder. If you're dying to find out what Karen Mitchell pulls next and whether my beloved land stays safe, smash that like button. Let's get this video to 39 likes, and hit subscribe to channel so you don't miss the rest of this crazy journey. The wind whispered through the tall pines, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and wildflowers across my property. It was late afternoon, the kind of golden hour where the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the rolling fields that stretched out behind my house. This wasn't just land to me. It was a refuge, a 40-acre slice of rural heaven I'd bought a decade ago, back when the nearest neighbor was a mile off, and the only sounds were crickets and the occasional hawk's cry. I'd built my home here with my own hands, a modest cabin of cedar and stone, its wide porch perfect for sipping coffee as the world woke up. This was my peace, my escape from the chaos of life. Back then, the area was a forgotten pocket of the county, too far from town for anyone to bother. I'd spend weekends tending the vegetable patch out back or hiking the wooded trails that wound through the property, my boots crunching on pine needles, my dog, Rusty, bounding ahead. It was just us and the land, private, untouched, mine. But time changes everything. Over the years, subdivisions sprouted up like weeds along the horizon, their manicured lawns and cookie-cutter houses creeping closer. Seaside Heights, the fanciest of them, sat a half-mile east, its gates gleaming with self-importance. I didn't mind the newcomers much. Most kept to themselves, and the occasional hiker who wandered onto my land was polite enough to leave when I pointed out the private property signs nailed to the trees. That is, until Karen Mitchell showed up. I first saw her about a year ago, jogging down my dirt path like she owned it. She was hard to miss, short and stocky, maybe 50, with a peroxide blonde bob that bounced with every step. Her pale skin was flushed pink from the run, and she wore a pristine navy tracksuit that screamed HOA money. I was splitting firewood by the shed when she trotted past, her blue eyes flicking toward me with a mix of curiosity and disdain. "Nice day," I called out, resting my axe on my shoulder, my voice friendly but firm. She didn't stop, just gave a curt nod and kept going, her sneakers kicking up dust. She came back the next week, then the next, each time cutting deeper into my land. I'd catch her silhouette through the trees, a navy blur against the green, and it started to grate on me. My signs weren't invisible, big, bold letters on every trailhead, private property, no trespassing. Yet there she was, ignoring them like they were decorations. One evening, I flagged her down, stepping into her path with Rusty at my heels. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my tone even, "this is private land. You're welcome to jog on the county road, but I'd appreciate it if you stayed off my property." She stopped, hands on her hips, and fixed me with a stare that could have curdled milk. "It's just a trail," she snapped, her voice nasal and sharp. "No harm done. Besides, this area is practically public with all the new houses around." Her lips curled into a smug little smirk, like she'd just won an argument I didn't know we were having. I took a breath, forcing a smile. "It's not public, it's mine. Please respect that." She rolled her eyes, muttered something under her breath, and jogged off. I figured that'd be the end of it. Most people get the hint. But Karen wasn't most people. A month later, I was sipping coffee on the porch when I heard it, a sharp crack echoing through the trees, then another. My mug froze halfway to my lips. Gunshots. On my land. I set the mug down, heart pounding, and grabbed my binoculars. Through the lenses, I spotted her, Karen, standing in a clearing 100 yards out, a rifle in her hands. She aimed at a makeshift target propped against a pine, oblivious to the danger, the arrogance of it all. My fists clenched. This wasn't just trespassing anymore. It was a line crossed, and I wasn't about to let it slide. I pulled on my boots, Rusty barking at my heels, and headed out to confront her. The air felt heavier now, The peace of my land shattered by those shots. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the spark of a war, one that'd test my patience, my resolve, and the very ground I stood on. Karen Mitchell, HOA Tyrant, had just declared herself my enemy, and I was ready to fight back. The crunch of pine needles under my boots matched the pounding in my chest as I strode toward the clearing, Rusty trotting beside me, his ears perked at the echo of that last gunshot. The late afternoon sun filtered through the trees, dappling the ground in patches of gold, but the beauty of my land felt tainted now, invaded. I could still hear the faint ringing in my ears from Karen's rifle, each shot a jab at the quiet I'd fought to protect. My hands balled into fists, the weight of my phone in my pocket a reminder to stay calm. Document this, not lose it. But calm wasn't easy when someone was turning your home into their playground. I broke through the tree line, and there she was, Karen Mitchell, standing in the middle of my clearing like a queen on a chessboard. Her navy tracksuit was swapped for a gray sweatshirt and black leggings, her blonde bob glinting under a ball cap. She held a sleek rifle, its barrel pointed lazily at a splintered board propped against one of my pines, a crude bullseye spray-painted on it. Empty shell casings littered the grass around her feet, glinting like discarded coins. She didn't hear me at first, too focused on reloading, her pale fingers fumbling with a magazine. Rusty growled low, and her head snapped up, blue eyes locking onto mine. "What the hell are you doing?" I called out, my voice cutting through the stillness. She straightened, lowering the rifle, but not setting it down, her lips curling into that smug smirk I'd come to loathe. "Target practice," she said like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "This spot's perfect, flat, open, no one around." She gestured at the clearing with a sweep of her arm, as if she'd discovered it herself. "No one around?" I stepped closer, my boots kicking up dust. "This is my land, Karen. I live here. And I've told you before, stay off." I pointed at the nearest sign, nailed to a tree 10 feet away. "Private property. No trespassing." The red letters glared at her, but she barely glanced at it. Rusty bared his teeth, a low rumble in his throat, and I put a hand on his collar to steady him. She rolled her eyes, shifting the rifle to her shoulder. "Oh, relax," she said, her nasal voice dripping with disdain. "It's just a little shooting. No harm done. You're overreacting, typical country bumpkin." The insult stung, but I swallowed it, keeping my gaze steady. "You're firing a gun near my house," I said, voice low and hard. "That's not no harm. That's dangerous and illegal. Pack up and get out now." Karen laughed, a sharp, grating sound that echoed off the trees. "Illegal? Please. This isn't some precious HOA lawn. It's a field. And I've got a permit for this rifle." She patted the gun like it was a pet, her smirk widening. "You can't stop me from using open space. It's practically community land with all the new houses around." Community land? My blood boiled. This wasn't her gated seaside heights. This was mine, bought and paid for with years of sweat. "It's not open space," I snapped, taking another step. "It's my property, and you're not welcome. Ever. Leave, or I'm calling the sheriff." I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over the screen. Her smirk faltered just for a second, but then she squared her shoulders, defiance flashing in her eyes. "Go ahead," she said, mimicking my stance. "Call them. They'll see I'm not hurting anyone. You're the one making a fuss over nothing." She turned back to her target, raising the rifle like I wasn't even there. Another crack split the air, the bullet slamming into the board, splinters flying. Rusty barked, lunging forward, and I yanked him back, my jaw tight. She called my bluff, or so she thought. I hit record on my phone, capturing her in the frame, the gun, the target, the sign she ignored. "Last chance, Karen," I said, voice cold. "Leave, or this video is going to the cops." She fired again, the sound a slap in the face, then lowered the rifle and faced me. "You're pathetic," she sneered, grabbing her bag of ammo. "Fine, I'll go for now. But this isn't over." She stomped off toward the tree line, her blonde hair bouncing with every step, leaving her shell casings behind like a taunt. I watched her go, the video still rolling, my pulse hammering. Rusty whined, sensing my tension, and I knelt to scratch his ears, muttering, She's wrong, boy. This is far from over. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky a fiery red, I stood in the clearing, staring at the scarred tree. Karen wasn't just a nuisance anymore. She was a threat. I tried warnings, signs, words. They didn't work. She'd be back. I knew it, and next time, I'd be ready. My land wasn't hers to claim, and I'd fight tooth and nail to prove it. The war had just begun. The next morning dawned cool and crisp, a thin mist clinging to the fields as I sipped coffee on the porch. Rusty sprawled at my feet. The quiet was back, but it felt fragile, like the calm before a storm. Karen's parting words echoed in my head. This isn't over. I'd replayed the video from yesterday a dozen times, her smug face framed against my trees, the gunfire jarring even through the phone's tiny speaker. She wasn't just trespassing. She was staking a claim, and every crack of that rifle felt like a challenge I couldn't ignore. I set my mug down, jaw tight. Words hadn't worked. Signs hadn't worked. It was time for something she couldn't brush off. I spent the day researching, hours on the phone with the county office, poring over property laws, double-checking every inch of my deed. By noon, I had a plan, an electric fence. Not some flimsy wire, but a sturdy 6-foot grid, legal, permitted, and impossible to miss. I called a local contractor, a grizzled guy named Hank who'd fenced half the farms in the county. Need it fast. I told him, explaining Karen's antics. He chuckled through the line. Sounds like one of them, HOA types. I'll have it up by week's end. Cameras too, if you want him. I did. If Karen came back, I'd have proof. The crew arrived 2 days later, their truck rumbling down my dirt drive with rolls of steel mesh and posts piled high. Hank, wiry and sun-weathered, hopped out, tipping his cap. Where's the line? He asked. I walked him around the perimeter, past the clearing, along the trails, skirting the woods, pointing out every no trespassing sign. By Friday, the fence stood tall, a gleaming barrier cutting through the green, wired with a low-voltage charge, just enough to sting, not harm. Cameras blinked red from strategic posts, and new signs screamed, private property, electric fence, keep out in bold black. I stood back, hands on my hips, and nodded. It wasn't pretty, but it was mine. For a week, it worked. No navy blur darted through the trees. No gunshots shattered the peace. I started to relax, tending my garden with Rusty nosing at the dirt, the hum of cicadas filling the air. Maybe Karen had finally gotten a message. But deep down, I knew better. She wasn't the type to back off. Sure enough, late one evening, as the sky bruised purple with dusk, my phone pinged. A camera alert. I opened the feed, heart sinking. There she was, Karen, creeping along the fence line, rifle slung over her shoulder, a flashlight bobbing in her hand. Her blonde bob caught the light, her pale face twisted in a scowl as she tested the gate. I grabbed my jacket and bolted outside, Rusty barking at my heels. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth as I reached the clearing, the fence humming faintly. Karen stood 10 feet away, prying at a post with a stick, muttering to herself. Hey, I shouted, my voice bouncing off the trees. She spun around, dropping the stick, her blue eyes wide with surprise, then narrowing with fury. What's this? She spat, jabbing a finger at the fence. You think you can keep me out with this junk? It's my land, I said, stepping closer, Rusty growling beside me. You've been warned. Now you'll feel it. Leave. She laughed, that sharp, grating sound, and slung the rifle off her shoulder. This is public access, she sneered. You can't fence off what's mine to use. Before I could respond, she lunged at the fence, gripping the mesh. A sharp zap cracked the air, and she yelped, stumbling back, her hand flying to her chest. For a moment, I thought she'd run, but then her face darkened, rage twisting her features. You'll pay for that, she screamed, raising the rifle. My stomach dropped as she aimed, not at me, but through the fence toward the cabin. Crack! The shot rang out, splintering a porch rail 100 yards off. Crack! Another hit the dirt near the garden. Rusty barked wildly, and I dove for cover behind a tree, fumbling for my phone. Sheriff, I gasped in 911. She's shooting at my house, Trespassing with a gun, hurry. Karen fired once more, then turned, sprinting toward the woods as sirens wailed in the distance. I crouched there, heart hammering, the camera feed still rolling. She'd crossed a line no one could ignore now. Not me, not the law. The fence had done its job, but this wasn't just about property anymore. It was personal, and Karen had just lit the fuse to her own downfall. The sirens grew louder, slicing through the twilight as I crouched behind the pine, my breath ragged, rusty pressed against my leg. The sharp tang of gunpowder hung in the air, mixing with the earthy scent of the woods. Karen's last shot still echoed in my ears, the splintered porch rail a jagged testament to her rage. I peeked around the trunk, phone clutched tight, the camera feed still live, her blonde bob vanishing into the trees, rifle swinging at her side. My hand shook, but not from fear. Anger burned hotter now. She'd attacked my home, my sanctuary, and I wasn't letting her slink away. Red and blue lights flashed through the branches as two sheriff's cruisers roared up my drive, gravel spitting under their tires. I stood, waving them over, Rusty barking like a sentinel. A deputy climbed out, broad-shouldered, maybe 40, with a buzz cut and a face carved from stone. "You the caller?" he asked, voice gruff. I nodded, pointing toward the woods. "She's in there, Karen Mitchell. Trespassing, shooting at my house. I've got on video." I handed him my phone, the footage playing, her zap from the fence, her furious shots, her fleeing figure. His jaw tightened as he watched. "Stay here," he said, motioning to his partner, a wiry woman with a ponytail and a flashlight, who drew her sidearm and headed into the trees. The deputy radioed for backup, his eyes scanning the fence, its warning signs glowing faintly in the dusk. I paced near the clearing, Rusty whining, every rustle in the woods setting my nerves on edge. Minutes stretched like hours, the hum of the fence a low drone beneath the distant crack of twigs. Then a shout. "Drop it! Hands up!" The woman's voice, sharp and commanding, cut through the night. A scuffle erupted, branches snapping, a high-pitched yell I knew was Karen's. I held my breath, gripping Rusty's collar. The deputies emerged, dragging her back into the clearing. Her gray sweatshirt was torn, her blonde bob a tangled mess, pale skin streaked with dirt. She thrashed in their grip, the rifle now in the woman's hands, her blue eyes wild with fury. "Let me go," she screeched, kicking at the ground. "He assaulted me. That fence, it's illegal." The male deputy yanked her arms behind her, cuffs clicking shut. "Assault, huh?" he said, nodding at my phone. "We'll see what the video says." Karen's gaze locked onto me, venom dripping from every word. "You set me up," she spat. "This is my land to use. You can't fence me out. I'll sue you for everything." She lunged, but the female deputy shoved her back, pinning her against the cruiser. "Enough," she barked. "You're under arrest, trespassing, discharging a firearm, assault." Karen's scream turned shrill. "Assault? He's the one with the death trap." I was defending myself. The male deputy ignored her, turning to me. "She hit you." I shook my head. "Just a house, porch and yard." Fence shocked her when she grabbed it. He grunted, inspecting the mesh. "Legal setup, signs, permits?" "All filed," I said, pulling out my paperwork. He skimmed it, nodding. "Good. She's got no leg to stand on." Karen overheard, her face twisting into a snarl. "You're all in on it," she howled, slamming her shoulder into the deputy. He stumbled, nose bloodied, and she froze as both officers tackled her to the ground. Add resisting and assaulting an officer, the woman growled, hauling Karen up. They shoved her into the cruiser, her curses muffled by the slamming door. The male deputy wiped his bloody nose, glaring at her through the window. "She's done," he said, handing back my phone. "We'll need your statement. Station tomorrow?" I nodded, relief washing over me as the car rolled away, Karen's silhouette raging in the back seat. I walked back to the cabin, Rusty trotting beside me, the night settling into quiet. The porch rail hung in pieces, bullet holes pocking the dirt, but the fence stood firm, its hum a steady promise. Karen was gone, for now, but her threats lingered. She'd sue, she'd fight, and I'd be ready. The law had her tonight, but this war wasn't over. I sank into a chair, staring at the stars, knowing the real battle was just beginning. The morning after Karen's arrest broke clear and bright, sunlight spilling over the fields, glinting off the electric fence like a victory banner. I stood on the porch, coffee mug in hand, surveying the damage, splintered railings, pockmarked dirt, a scarred pine in the distance. Rusty nose at the bullet holes, tail wagging as if it were all a game. The silence felt earned, heavier than before, like the land itself was exhaling. I'd won the night, but the war wasn't over. Not until Karen faced the full weight of what she'd done. I sipped my coffee, the bitter warmth steadying me, and vowed to see this through. The sheriff's station was a squat brick building 10 miles out, its lot buzzing with deputies when I arrived. I gave my statement, handed over the video, every frame of Karen's trespassing, her shots, her meltdown. The deputy from last night, nose bandaged, took it with a grim nod. "She's a piece of work," he said, scrolling through the footage. "Claimed you attacked her with that fence. Self-defense, she says." I snorted. "She attacked my house. Check the bullets." He smirked. "Oh, we will. She's not wiggling out of this." Weeks later, the courthouse loomed, a gray slab against a gray sky, fitting for the mess Karen had made. She'd lawyered up, countersuing me for assault with the fence, clinging to her story like a lifeline. I sat in the gallery, Rusty's absence a quiet ache, as my attorney laid out the case. Deed, permits, camera feeds showing her jogging, shooting, raging. Karen took the stand, her blonde bob slicked back, gray suit crisp, but her pale face pinched with strain. "It's public land," she insisted, voice shrill. "He can't fence it off?" I was protecting my rights. My lawyer pounced. "Your rights?" he said, projecting the video, Karen firing through the fence, bullets tearing into my property. "This is you, yes?" She squirmed, blue eyes darting. "Yes, but he shocked me. I had to defend myself." The room stirred, murmurs rippling through. "So you admit trespassing?" he pressed. "No. I mean, it's not his land," she sputtered. The judge leaned forward, glasses glinting. "Ma'am, the deed says otherwise. And this footage, dated months back, shows you there repeatedly." "Explain." She couldn't. Her lies unraveled, thread by thread. As the video looped, her grabbing the fence, her shots, her punching the deputy. The assault charge sealed it. Her lawyer's objections drowned in the evidence. The gavel fell. Guilty, trespassing, firearm violations, resisting arrest, assaulting an officer. 1 year in jail, gun rights revoked, a fat fine she'd never pay off from her HOA throne. Her countersuit collapsed, and I walked out into the crisp air, free. Back home, the fence stood tall, its hums switched off. I didn't need it live anymore, just the threat of it. I patched the porch, smoothed the dirt, let the land heal. Neighbors dropped by, folks from beyond Seaside Heights who'd dodged Karen's HOA grip. "Heard you took her down," one said, grinning. "She tried finding me for my barn once." We laughed, the shared relief a quiet bond. Her house in the subdivision sold fast. Rumor said, to cover her debts, she'd vanished, a ghost chased off by her own arrogance. One evening, I sat on the porch, Rusty at my feet, the sky a wash of purple and gold. The woods whispered, the fields stretched wide, and no gunshots broke the peace. I'd fought for this. Every acre, every tree, and won. The fence stayed, a silent guardian, unpowered unless another Karen came knocking. I doubted it. Word had spread, and my land was mine again, untouchable. I scratched Rusty's ears, smiling as the stars winked on. "We did it, boy," I said. The wind carried my words away, over the pines, into the night. A promise kept, a home reclaimed.